Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to this afternoon's webinar. My name's Jackie, and today we're going to be looking at customer corrections in Sage 50 accounts. So the session is called customer corrections. However, it will also cover supplier corrections as well, because what we're going to talk about today is applicable across both modules. So just to start with, we'll do our housekeeping first of all. So you will notice that your microphone has been placed on mute. That just means that you can't speak to us today. But if you do have any questions, you're more than welcome to submit them throughout the session using the icon that looks like a speech bubble with the question mark in the middle, and that will allow you to type your questions across to us. We've got full team on hand today. We've got Michael, Abby and Matt on in the background here for any questions you may have. So don't feel you need to wait till the end either. There is a handout for today's session, so if you want to take a copy of that, you're looking for the icon that looks like a document with the folder corner, and that will give you a copy of today's slides. And after today's session, there will be a follow-up email, and in there will be a link to follow any recordings. What you'll also be able to see is our upcoming webinars. So we're currently in a series of corrections. So we are continuing with corrections this week and next week and into December. So if you do want to follow one of those sessions, then you can register using the links in the email today. Okay, so what we're going to cover, first of all, we'll go through the corrections feature. We're going to look at editing some transactions and also deleting some transactions. We'll then talk about manual corrections, and then we'll look at the write-off, refund and returns wizard. And then finally, we'll have time for questions at the end of the session there. Okay, so we're going to talk first of all about the corrections feature. So the corrections feature is what you can find in your transactions module within the software. And this is where we've got the option to view, edit, unallocate and delete. So first up, we've got the option to view transactions. So this allows you to see the posting details of a transaction. What's also great about this feature is it also allows you to see what the transaction has been allocated towards as well. So you can delve a bit deeper there. The edit option obviously allows you to edit certain fields on a transaction. So not all fields can be edited, but those that can be edited can be done through the edit feature. We have the unallocate option. So the unallocate option is the option you would use to sever the link between two transactions. So you can allocate transactions together, such as an invoice and a payment or an invoice and a credit. And if you ever do need to make those no longer allocated, you use the unallocate feature. And finally, we've got the delete option. So this is the option to remove a transaction from the ledgers. It doesn't remove it from the software. It will leave that transaction in your software. And if it's VAT reconciled, what it will do is it will post a reversal as opposed to deleting the transaction. So we're going to have a look at those in action so that you can see examples of each of those scenarios as well. So just before we go into the first demonstration there, just want to talk to you about critical fields and the difference between those and non-critical fields. And this becomes important when you're trying to edit a transaction. So a critical field tends to be those fields that are sort of the key ones to a transaction. So things like the amount, the net tax split on there, the tax code, the date of the transaction, but also the supplier or customer reference. Whereas non-critical fields are fields that tend to have more of the text information on. So things like the transaction reference, the transaction details, the department number, payment reference and bank reconciliation flag are all considered non-critical fields. Now a critical field means that if we make an amendment to that transaction, then if it's a critical field we're amending, what it will do is it will actually cancel the first transaction and post a brand new one because it's a critical field. If it's a non-critical field, it will allow that change to take place with no reversal or cancellation required. So there's a difference in between how those transactions will react depending on whether it's a critical field or a non-critical field you're amending. And at the bottom of the page there, we do have a link to an article that helps you to understand when you've got a transaction that has details which refer to deleted or cancelled transactions. So that's a really handy article to have, maybe add as one of your favorites so you can have a look at that when you need to. So with critical and non-critical fields on mind, we're going to have a look at those in just a moment and what happens when we edit one of those fields. Now, just before we move on to the demo, just want to give you some important considerations as well. Okay, everything we're going to do today in the demonstration, we're going to be doing in the transactions window unless I'm specifying otherwise. And that means that the corrections I'm going to make today aren't going to impact any other ledgers. Okay, so if it's an invoice that has resulted from the invoices and credits module, when we delete the transaction, it doesn't actually delete the invoice in your invoices and credits list. The same with stock. So if stock is moved as part of an invoice or an order going through, when we cancel the transaction from the transactions window, it doesn't impact that stock movement. So it doesn't have any impact on original invoices or orders or quotations. And deleted transactions will still show in the transaction window. Okay, so I mentioned that earlier. So it won't remove them entirely from the software, it will remove them from the ledgers, but they will show in red, and that is because it needs to be there for audit purposes. Okay, so I've got quite a demo to start with before we come back to manual corrections, so I'll make a start there. So I'm just going to pop onto my data set for today. And what we've got, if I go into transactions, is a series of transactions that we're going to be looking at today. So let's start off first with those 4 options we showed you earlier, which is the options to view, edit, unallocate, and to delete. So we're going to have a quick look at these. So first of all, I've got transaction 10 highlighted. I'm going to highlight transaction 10. And what we've got here is the option to view the transaction. So viewing the transaction allows us to see all of the posting details. We're able to see things like the gross amount, the foreign gross amount if it's a foreign transaction. We can also see the exchange rate on here as well. And when we go to view at the bottom, we can go into even more detail. So we can see things like the department, the net tax split on there, the tax code that's being used, but also at the very bottom, quite important, if that transaction is allocated to another transaction, which one is it? So I can see quite clearly from this that my sales invoice number 10 is allocated towards sales receipt number 11. So that just helps me to start tracing where my allocations are. So that is the view feature. The edit option, if I just find one to edit, go into the edit option here. You can see when we go into edit, not everything can be edited. Okay, there are certain fields on here I can edit, such as the date, the created on date, and if I go into edit again down here, I can edit certain values in this window, but not always can you edit every single field. We have the unallocate option. Now, as you can see, that's grayed out at the moment. So this will only highlight when you have an applicable transaction highlighted. So at the moment, this invoice here is not allowing me to unallocate because it's not actually marked as paid. And I can see that by looking at the paid column. So it's not been allocated yet. However, if I look a bit further down at transaction 9, for example, you can see this has got a Y in the paid column, and the unallocate feature has become available. Okay, so it's allowing me to use that option, but we'll come back to that in a moment so that we can show you unallocating a little bit later on. And then the last one is the delete option. So highlighting that takes us straight into the same window we saw when we viewed and we edited. And if it will allow us to delete, we can click on here and it will go through the steps for us, but we'll show you that one in just a few moments' time. Okay, so we're going to actually do some corrections now, so you can see these corrections in action. So the first one I want to do is to really show you the difference between those critical and non-critical fields. So I'm going to do an edit first of all. So I'm going to edit transaction 1. And in here, I'm going to edit what we're going to call a non-critical field, because it's going to be the department that we're going to be changing. So first of all, before we go into this transaction to amend it, let's just take note that at the moment, I don't have any transactions showing as deleted. You can see there's nothing in red, and my last transaction number is number 21. Okay, just so you know where our starting point is. So I'm going to go into edit on transaction 1. And as you can see from the first edit window there, we don't have the ability to edit the department anywhere. So we do need to go into the next window, which is here. And the second window here is allowing me to make a change to the department. So I'm just going to change that department over to department 3, for example. I just need to close on this window, select the option to save, and it asks me if I want to post the changes. So if I said no to this, it would just cancel what we're trying to achieve. So we need to say yes, give that a second to update. And what you should be able to see is we don't have any transactions showing in red. So that one hasn't appeared in red, and no additional transactions have appeared. However, if we look at that original transaction, you can see, if you look very closely there, the department has now changed to department 3. What we can also see is if we scroll along here, a bit further along, you can see that it has been edited. Okay, so we can see who it was edited by and also the edited on date. So that's quite useful. If you're trying to trace who's making changes to these transactions, you can see the username and also the date that was changed. So that was a non-critical field. So we're going to do exactly the same, but this time we're going to use a critical field. So I'm going to use transaction 2, and rather than the department, we're going to change that date. So I'm just going to go back to edit, and we can make the amendment on the first screen here. So I'm just going to change that date by 1 day, just posted incorrectly, and then I'm going to save. And again, we get the option, do we want to post the changes? Yes, I do. And you can see already that's slightly different to what happened when we did the non-critical field. So what's happened is, you'll see we have now a new transaction down at the bottom here. So transaction 22 has appeared. So this new transaction has appeared. It has deleted C transaction 2 and the details. And this transaction has all the posting details of that original transaction that was there. So it has the original date, which was the 22nd, and all the other details. So it's allowing me to sort of keep track of the changes that have been made. Number 2, transaction 2, which is what we amended, is now replaced with the new live transaction. So all the details are the same. The only thing that has changed is the date there. So you can see it's got that new date that I specified, but also there's nothing in the edited column because that's now the live transaction. It's the new transaction that is showing as edited by. So that is because we have made a change to a critical field. So that's the difference between the two. Okay, so that is non-critical and critical fields. What we're going to look at next is doing a deletion of a transaction. Now, if I was to delete a transaction that didn't have any VAT flag on it or VAT reconciliation flag on it, it would essentially just delete the transaction for me. However, we've just added another sort of level to this transaction that we're going to do next, because we've also brought into it VAT reconciliation. So if you take a look at transaction number 4, which is the one we're going to do next, we have a quick look at this one, we can see that this has been included on a VAT return number 1, and that was done at the end of September. So essentially, this sales invoice we've reported to HMRC and we've paid VAT on that invoice. So when we come to delete this transaction, we need to then inform HMRC that that then has been deleted. Now, thankfully, the software now does that for us. Okay, in the past we'd have to do a manual reversal, but the software does take care of that for you. So you'll notice that the wording is slightly different when we go to delete this transaction. So first of all, we'll go to delete. So I've highlighted the transaction, go to delete, and I'm going to delete again. And as you see there, previously it was asking if I wanted to post changes. Now it's asking me if I want to reverse the transaction. So to undo this, I do need to reverse the transaction. And again, we should see a new transaction appear again. So the new transaction that is posted is a reversal. So the original transaction was an invoice. What we've got down here is a live transaction, so it's not showing in red, so it is in fact live. That's why it says cancel rather than deleted. It's a sales credit note and it has all the same details as the original invoice. The only thing that's different is that it is a credit note. So this is the reversal. The original invoice still shows in the software, so it's still a live transaction, okay, because we've reported on it. So we can't delete it. So it still shows as a live transaction. But what you can see there clearly in the column for the reference is cancel. So again, it's got that reference in there, so we can see that that transaction has effectively been cancelled off. Now, what would happen next time is we come to do our VAT return. What we should be doing is including that in the return, this new correction. So for example, let's do it now. We'll go into the VAT return. And you can see my last one was for September. So I'm going to do the October return. And I'm just going to calculate there. And what has happened is it's looked for all of my transactions for October. It's started to calculate those, but it has recognized that prior to October, we do have a transaction that should be submitted to HMRC. So it's picked that up as an earlier unreconciled transaction. So what we need to do ideally at this point is we need to include that in our next return. Okay, so we've got this credit note here. We need to include that in our October return to inform HMRC that we're amending something from a previous period. Now the option here, unfortunately, is include or ignore, but it is all or nothing. So if we did have a list here of several transactions, and I wanted to include some and ignore others, that becomes a bit tricky at this point. So what you would need to do is you'd need to work out the ones that you need to ignore. Why do you need to ignore them? Why are they there in the first place? Have they been posted with the wrong dates? Are they incorrect transactions? We need to really deal with those so that they don't come up time and time again. So the corrections that are sitting in this window can all be included. So really what we should only ever have in here is corrections or late entries, entries that you've entered after that period was closed down. So we'd select include, and that would take it into our October return. Okay, so that is deleting a VAT reconciled transaction. Again, keep your questions coming. If you've got any coming to mind, please do get them across to the guys. They'll get those answered for you. Because I'm going to now show you the unallocate feature. So I'm just going to pop into the transactions module, back into here. And for this, we're going to actually look at transaction number 5. So transaction number 5 here, if we have a look at it in view, we can see on view again, it is allocated to sales receipt number 6. Okay, so it's nice and easy in this case. So these two are tied together They are allocated against one another. However, it may just be that we've maybe allocated the wrong invoice or the wrong payment to the invoice. And the same can be done with credit notes or any other transaction that has actually been allocated. So again, on your suppliers. So I just want to point out something before I make this amendment is at the moment my payment is showing as a sales receipt, an SR transaction, okay? And they're both showing as allocated to one another. They've got a Y in the paid column. If I go to unallocate, you can see it's available for me. Do I want to unallocate? I'm going to say yes. There's a few things change. First of all, that sales receipt changes to an SA transaction, which is a payment on account. The details still say sales receipt, but their paid flag is now N. So it's saying no, it's not paid at the moment. So that means that I can then go back and reallocate that to a different transaction. Or if I've made a mistake, I could reallocate these back against one another if I needed to. But this invoice is now able to be allocated elsewhere. It might be a payment, it might be a credit note. So that is the unallocate feature. Now the last thing I'm going to do just before we pop back to the slides is transaction 7. I just want to show you transaction 7 first of all, because transaction 7 is an invoice which has actually originally come from the invoices and credits module. Okay, I can tell that because it's linking into a product. It's also got a reference in here which is referencing the invoice it's come from. So if I look back at my invoices and credits module, we're looking at invoice number 2. So I had reference to, it's this one here, this invoice. So this invoice has been created in invoices and credits. When we updated to ledgers, it created that transaction on the transactions window, but it also moved stock out of stock. So when we look at product 1, so it's linking into several modules here. If we just look at the activity of product 1, you can see that as a result of invoice 2, one item was moved out as a goods out transaction. Now, when we delete this transaction from transactions, which I'll do now, I'm just going to delete it. That's now deleted. You can see deleted SI, so that's how easy it is to delete something that's not reconciled. It's deleted the SI, however, the original invoice is still there, unchanged. Also, in products, that stock movement is still there as well. So we've literally deleted it from one module and one module only. We haven't fed back into those other modules. So that is something to take into consideration. Okay, now I'm not going to go into too much detail on this because we do have a dedicated session on this very process in a couple of weeks' time. So if you are interested in how the invoicing module works, please do get registered for that session. We'll have some more examples there. But what you might want to use as an alternative is rather than deleting the transaction, to make sure that all of the steps are reversed, if that's what you're trying to achieve, is you may be looking at using the credit option. So you've got options to use a new credit or to credit invoice. And what that will do is when it credits, it also does a good return on your products, and it also creates that credit note that you can actually print and give to your customer too. So check out that session. I believe it's next week, and that is on correcting invoices and orders, and there is another one on correcting stock as well. As you can see, we're flying through time this afternoon, so we wouldn't have time to cover that in this session, so we've done dedicated sessions on those. Okay, so that is the initial part of the demo there. We're just going to go back onto the slides. And we're just going to talk about manual corrections. Okay, so I've mentioned earlier that corrections feature is there, and it makes life a lot easier than it was a few years ago when we had to do manual corrections all of the time. However, you might find yourself in a situation where you can't actually post a transaction or delete a transaction or edit a transaction. You need to do a manual correction of that. Now, we've provided two slides, one for customers and one for suppliers, showing the different transaction types that are available for each and the reversing transaction. So for example, if you're going to reverse a sales invoice, you'd use a credit note. If you're reversing a credit note, you would use an invoice, for example. So we have provided the list there just so you know what type of transaction you'd need to use. But I want to show you a good example here of a time when you may need to do a manual correction. So again, I've got a demonstration to show you this in just a moment. But what I'm going to demonstrate is manually correcting a fully paid invoice. So the fully paid invoice involves a sales invoice, and that's been allocated against a sales receipt. Now, for example, it may be that you're not using the invoicing module, but you need to undo that. So yes, you could delete it, but it might be that you need to credit that off in the system. So not only would you need to do a credit note to reverse the original invoice, you'd also need to do a transaction to reverse the sales receipt. So you would need to do a sales payment transaction. So let's just show you that in demonstration. Pop back into the data set. So we're just going to go into this one here for customer 5. So customer 5 has got an invoice and that is paid off by a receipt. So if we go into the customer record, I'll show you the balance is 0. So the invoice has been paid off by the sales receipt. Now we need to reverse that. Okay, so what we first of all need to do is do sales credit note against this one and then issue a refund to correct the bank. So let's pop that on. Let's pop an credit on for 408. So we're just going to find out the details of that original transaction there. So it was £408 altogether on a T1, and that was on the 12th. So you need to decide if you're reversing it as of today's date, or are you reversing it as of the date that that invoice was issued. So I'm just going to go into my customers and into a credit. As you can see, the details have all been filled in based on me highlighting the item first. And I'm going to reverse it as of the date it was originally posted. It's using 4,000 and it was 408 altogether. So I'm going to use the calc net option there just to calculate the net tax split for me because it was using a T1. So I'm just going to leave everything else as it is. I'm not going to put any details in at the moment. I'm just going to save there for you. And what that has done is it's popped a balance onto that customer account. So if we have a look at their activity again, and into their activity, you can see there I've got the invoice paid off by the receipt, but now we have the credit note, so we've got nothing to balance that out. So essentially what we need to do is a sales payment on account, a sales payment, which is an SP, or also known as a refund. So I'm going to do that next. So to refund that credit note, we need to use the refund feature at the top. And this looks a little bit like the customer payment window or the supplier payment window. So we select our customer. We just need to make sure the date is right that we're doing the refund as of. And as you can see there, it's pulled up the details of the credit, which is an outstanding credit note. So all I need to do is pop into here and refund in full, because it's a full refund we're doing. If I save, that takes our balance back to 0, and that means the whole invoice and payment have all been reversed there. So it's not as common that you're going to need to be in that situation. Okay, the software, where possible, will try and take care of that for you, but this is just to arm you with everything you would need to cover every eventuality. Okay, so I'm going to jump back onto the slides. Again, keep the questions coming there, because I'm going to move on to our last topic of the day, which is the write-off and refund wizard. So the write-off and refund wizard can also be used to help you when you're processing things like invoice refunds. You might be doing a payment on account refund, or you might be trying to write off certain accounts or transactions. So we have a wizard that can help you with that. Now, the pros of this is it is automatic. So once you have posted using the wizard, it automatically posts using the correct details for you. You don't need to be double checking yourself in terms of dates, etc. And it does make life a little bit easier because it locates the transactions you may wish to be refunding or writing off and helps you with those postings. The cons are you can't do a partial refund or write-off. So earlier there was a question there about making a partial cancellation. So that wouldn't be possible using the write-off and refund wizard. And you can't use this for foreign transactions or on the VAT cash scheme. So there are some cons around using this. So we're going to show you a few examples of how this write-off, refund and returns wizard can help you. But there are in fact 8 different wizards in the software that will post for you. So what I've done here is I've actually allowed you to see what it's going to do in each scenario and also what type of transaction it will post. So what's going to be achieved by this. So for example, on a customer invoice refund, it will look for any paid invoices like we've just done as a manual example, and it will actually post that sales credit and sales payment for you. Okay, so we've just done the manual process. We're going to show you how to do it as an automatic one. Also things like refunding a payment on account. So if you've got a payment on account, a customer's issued you a deposit and they've asked a few months down the line for a return, then again, the wizard can help you with that. But what's great about the feature is it does allow you to very quickly identify maybe customers or transactions that you want to write off. So if you do get to a point with a customer, you've not been using them for many, many years, you've got lots of outstanding values under a certain value, so it might just be a penny here, a penny there, then you can use the write-off wizard to do that quickly rather than having to do lots of little invoices or credit notes. The write-off wizard will help you with that. So I'm going to do a demonstration again of these, and I'm not going to demonstrate all of them because, as I mentioned, there are 8 options in here. So let me just locate the transactions first of all. So just finding the right one there. Bear with me. Just going to locate the right one there. Okay, there we go. Got my notes slightly muddled up there. I thought it was back onto customer 5, but we're on customer 6 here. So as you can see here, we're in very much a similar position to that customer we were earlier, where we've just done a manual reversal. Okay, now remember I had to go and find what posting details to use. I needed to work out what nominal code did they use originally, what posting date did they originally use. So there was a lot of cross-checking and a lot of opening up places where things can go wrong. So I'm going to actually do the same process but via a different route now. I'm going to use the write-off and returns option for this. So I'm going to go into write-offs and returns at the top of customers there, into the wizard, and I'm going to use the first option here for this example. So I'm going to find my customer 6 and next, and immediately it finds that paid invoice for me to refund. So all I need to do at this point is highlight it and pick which bank account I want to do that to. So I'm just going to select my 1200 and next. So the only thing I need to remember now is what date do I want to post this as of? Do I want to use today's date or do I want the original posting date? So I'm going to leave that as today's date for now and then select next. So next I can see a little bit of information about what it's going to post. It's going to post onto customer 6, today's date and the total there. So I'm going to select post, and at the click of a button there, go back into transactions. It posted exactly the same as what it did beforehand with the refund that I did manually. But it did it far quicker than I did manually, but it's also again popped into the reference column automatically the word refund. So it's easy to locate that that was a refund we've posted using that wizard. So looking at the customer record, so customer 6, if we go back in, that whole process was reversed with the same types of transactions, a sales credit note and then a sales payment, and that has reversed that original paid off invoice. Okay, so that was demonstration 1. I'm going to show you another one now, which is refunding a payment on account. So again, like I mentioned earlier, it might be that you've received a deposit and the customer has in fact asked for that to be returned. So I'm going to do the same write-off refund wizard. And this time I'm going to select option 4, payment on account refund. So I just need to select which customer we're going to use, which is customer 7. And then we've got a transaction highlighted here. So it's recognized one payment on account. It's giving me the option there. Obviously, if I had 2 or 3, I would have a list to pick which ones I want to do, or if I wanted to do multiple. I'm going to select my bank account and next again, because I'm just going to use today's date and post. And you'll notice now that that customer is back to 0. So that overpayment has now gone. And in the activity, you can see originally we had that payment on account. It's now been refunded with that sales payment transaction. Okay, one final example. We're going to use customer 8 for this. So as you can see there, customer 8 has a small balance of minus £5.50. Okay, and this means that they've given me overpayments over the years. However, we're no longer working with that customer. It's been quite some time since we've heard from them, and we want to wipe off this balance so that we can start the process of maybe clearing down their activity and removing them from the software. So it's been a good period of time since we've actually used them. And we know that we're never going to send that money back. It might be that they've gone into liquidation. They're no longer around for us to issue that £5.50. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the write-off and returns wizard again. And this can be done for small underpayments as well. You can use the option for write-off transactions or transactions below a value, but I'm going to do overpayments for this one here. So I'm going to pop in a value of £5. I'm just going to select next, and it's located on that customer 3 overpayments of £1, £2 and £2.50. So I'm going to select all of these because I wanted to do all of them on one go for me. So you can either do that by highlighting them individually or select swap, and then from there you can deselect. I'm going to leave all of them highlighted, and then I'm going to select next, and again we just select the date. So I'm going to leave today's date. Now, at no point has it asked me what nominal code I want to post that to. And because we're writing off, it's got an automatic nominal code in mind. And that is set up by our control accounts. So it actually uses the bad debt nominal code. So if I click next, I'll show you that in just a moment. So that's posted it. The balance has come back to 0. And we can go into transactions. You can see it's posted invoices for those overpayments of 1, 2 and 250. Bad debt is in the reference, and the nominal code is the bad debt nominal code, which was 8100. So it's automatically posted that, so it's impacting my profit and loss to indicate that bad debt write-off, or in this case, that overpayment write-off. So that is essentially how to do corrections on your customers module. Like I say, it's pretty similar for your suppliers module as well. We just try and focus on one side so it doesn't get too complicated or too confusing for the demonstration. But yes, you can do the same in suppliers there. Okay, so I'm going to pop back to the slides now. We're going to do a quick summary. So if you've got any questions, we're into our last few minutes there. Please do take the opportunity to get your questions across there. So first of all, transactions can be corrected in the transactions window, and that would be your first port of call. Try and get them corrected in there without having to do any manual corrections. If it can't be deleted by the software, then it will be reversed, and the software again will try and help you with that. Unallocate severs the link between two transactions. That means that they can be allocated elsewhere, or if you've made a mistake, they can be reallocated back against one another. You then have the write-off refund wizard, and this can be used to post refunds or write-off accounts that meet certain criteria. And just remember that none of the options I've shown you today will impact the invoices and credits module, sales orders, or products and services modules. And just to reiterate, everything we've shown you today is similar within the suppliers module too. Okay, so this is your opportunity for any final questions. We're going to just have a look at the upcoming webinars there for you so that you can see what we've got ready for you to register for. So you can find our upcoming webinars on sage.co.uk/webinars, or you can go onto our help centre, which we've got here, and in the help centre, select Sage 50 accounts, and you can type in the word webinars from here. Now, not only will you see our upcoming webinars, but you can access recordings of previous sessions, and that just allows you to watch in your own time. Also allows you to see all of our catalogue of content as well. We have got a dedicated article on the correction webinars, so if you do want to join us on those and you're just wanting to see a list of those corrections ones only, you can use this link here. But if you use our main link, they are posted at the very top there with easy access for you to get to. So we're going to be back tomorrow at 11 o'clock to look at correcting journals. So if you are regularly posting journals, want to know a bit more about corrections of those, then join us tomorrow. And then on Thursday, we're back with VAT. And then next week, we'll be on to invoice and orders as well. So as you can see, there's quite a few different topics coming up. And we're also offering multiple dates as well. But beyond that, we've got lots of other content. So we're looking at things like company archives, we've got journals, we've also got year end, and also things like quick fixes in the software. So adding filters and using the quick search feature to locate transactions and records. So do take a look, get yourself registered. We'll be absolutely over the moon to see you on as many sessions as you can there. And we're also scheduled right up to the Christmas period as well. Okay, so I think we're pretty much on top of the questions there. So I think Abby's just finalising one there. So a quick one that I'll just try and sort of help with there is it possible to edit the tax code for a tax invoice that has already been updated to the ledgers? So it kind of ties into the session we're probably doing next week. I'll just bring my data back and just use one of these as an example. I'll use this one here. So if you've got an invoice already created on here, if you've already posted to ledgers, it will tell you that any amendments will not be posted to ledgers. You might not see that because you've maybe switched that one off. You can actually say not to show again. So if you were to try and amend it on here, I can't do this because it's already posted. Okay, so you would have to actually look at maybe correcting the invoice first. So maybe doing a crediting off the original invoice and then posting a new invoice to reflect the correct tax treatment on that one. Another one there is, are the recordings of the webinar? Yes, absolutely. There are recordings of all of our webinars. So if you can't make an allocated time, if we haven't done them before, which isn't many now, if we haven't done them before, they will be available shortly after. Just give us a little bit of time to download them, get them rendered and turned around, and we'll get them on our website for you. We try to make absolutely all of them available to our customers there. So yes, keep an eye out the recordings. If you can't make a live session, please do keep an eye out. You'll be able to access them there. Okay, that looks like we've run perfectly on time, and I think we're on top of all the questions as well, so that's fantastic news for us. So we would absolutely love to see you again on another session really soon, so please do get yourself registered. But in the meantime, for now, I think we'll end the session there. So thank you very much for joining us today, and we'll see you on another session really soon. But bye for now.